My guest today is someone who was on the podcast in late 2021, and I wanted to get him back on the podcast to talk about a recent breakthrough that he's had in his speed and his times with his freestyle. Because we've been working together for the last couple of years, and the swimmer who I've had on has hit a bit of a plateau, but managed to break through. So I thought it'd be great to dig into that because I know a lot of people listening to this experience the same thing. They get stuck at a certain pace and they're just banging their head against the wall trying to figure out what they can do to see a breakthrough. In terms of the recent breakthrough you've had, could you dig into the details there, like what pace you're stuck at
Yeah,
or that kind of thing?
I had hit a plateau at 130 and I found my top end speed and my all day speed sort of compressing, right? And instead of everything dropping, I was getting to this point where my top end speed was not much better than 130, but I could cruise at 132 for a really long time. It was really bizarre that everything wasn't coming down together. Now, if I went all out, I could, my best at that point was 117. So like fully gas, I could get down into that fast. But, any tempo work, any race pace work, whatever, it was every time I looked at my watch, 130, 130, 130, 129, 131. It was just so beyond frustrating. And we were working on a lot of stuff and I was not like I wasn't putting in the time. I was swimming at least 4 times a week, sometimes 5 or 6. And I was I was focusing on at the time primarily stroke rate and a mild amount of strength training and stretching because I had I had sort of recognized that those were weaknesses of mine. But in terms of in the pool swimming, I had been focusing on stroke rate because as you've said to me many times, like there are two variables here. There's stroke rate and there's distance per stroke. And whatever you're doing needs to be attending to one or both of those. And the more directly, the better. So you and I were working on some small things and focused things, but the real focus for my work during that time period was stroke rate. And I had a really slow stroke rate when I started in the like mid 50s maybe. And I was gradually working it up. But here I am working it up. I'm getting to be comfortable with 64, 65, 67, 68's pushing it a little bit. And the pace isn't moving. It's harder work, but I'm not going any faster. And it ultimately ended with, I think, for lack of a better phrase, sort of an aha moment. The videos that I was taking of myself and sharing with you, I would replay those all the time, partly out of frustration. I've got to figure this out. There's got to be something that's holding me back. It's two variables. What is it that's in the way? And what what really has resonated in my mind since the Noosa camp that I went to with you guys was something that one of your other coaches said to me that's rattled around in my head since he said it. And it was, your back end looks like it's along for the ride. And in the front view, you can see the back end wiggling. And in the side view, you can see it undulating. And not a pretty undulation either. It's not like a combo of a butterfly stroke and a freestyle stroke. It was more like what it looked to me in hindsight was it was I'm I'm taught as I'm going through the catch and the pull. As soon as the pull is done, my back end just sort of gives up. And that was causing this undulation of the back end. And the mind is a funny thing when you're watching yourself or anybody else for that matter, when you're watching a video, you see what you want to see and you overemphasize in many cases good things and you sort of overlook some of the bad things. And the more I looked at it, the more I slowed it down, the more I freeze framed it, took snapshots. I finally got to the point where I took a snapshot and I sent it to you. And I said, look, this is really bad. It was an unfair snapshot because it was the worst possible undulation where if these are the hips, that, the legs were like that. But that was the low point of the undulation. And in a freeze frame, it really highlighted that that's a big problem. Even if it's coming back up real quickly, you're dragging your legs like a seahorse through the water for some period of time, a half a second, a quarter of a second, doesn't matter. You are a your dead weight anchor pulling through water for part of your stroke, every single stroke, because you're not keeping your body taut. And that was the light bulb that went off. And I took that and I coupled it with two things: stroke rate, distance per stroke. I put aside all the work on stroke rate, and that drag through the water I figured, has to be affecting distance per stroke. So winding back a little bit to come back to where I am now, I have always felt since the day I started swimming competitively that I've had a weak core and a weak upper body. But in this particular case, it's the weak core that matters. 18 months of staring frustratingly at 130 on my watch every 100 yards, I said I have got to fix that core weakness, because it it's either just plain old weakness, or it's a lack of attention span fully through the strokes. It's one or the other, or maybe both. And long story short, the the, the attention to that paid instant dividends. And I was giddy. The next time I pinged you, and so I just did. You gave me a workout to do. I whatever 12, somewhere between 12 and 20 100s, whatever you can do, at a VO2 max pace, 30-second rests. Tell me what you're going to hold. And I went and did that, and I nailed it at like 124. 12. I think I did 12 in a row. I was a bit winded after that, but I figured 12 in a row, and staying in a narrow window, 124, 124 and a half, whatever. It was a home run. And I thought, this is it. This has to be what caused the problem. And so, long story, eventually the aha bulb goes off. You realize what it is. It's been staring me in the face probably for 15 months. And once you sort of admit what that big problem is, and focus all your attention on it, the other mechanics were decent. So it's not like something else is going to be a problem. Once I focused on that, and it just clicked, and I took 3, 4, 5 seconds off that kind of aggressive, but not overly aggressive pace.
And was it a combination of strength training for the core, or just more about what you focused on in the water?
Mm. Well, initially it was simply paying attention. So mm, mm, there's another thread here I can talk about in a minute, which is the ongoing work that I'm doing to improve the body line in the water, or the core strength, et cetera. There's a program set there now that hopefully will continue to pay more dividends. But in the short term, it was simply, I can tell from the video that I'm letting go of the back end as my pull finishes, but before the next one starts. Just simply staying focused on that, and trying to discover cues in the water that allow me to know that I'm paying attention. I'm not losing it. Now, there's no rear view mirror in swimming when you're in the pool. You can't see your legs. And so depending on how good your proprioception is, and your awareness of how you're sitting in the water, and I don't think mine was that good, I could sort of feel the undulation as it was recovering, but I wouldn't feel it as I was going into it. So what I've done since this aha moment was, every few strokes, I will make sure that my legs, my feet, my heels are not that far from the water line. And all it takes is a little bit of a bend. All it should take is a little bit of a bend in the knee for the heel to pop out of the water. If I have to bend the knee a lot to feel the air, then I know that I've let it go. And developing that kind of cue for me has been fantastic because I could do that every lap. I could do it 2 or 3 times a lap. I could do it every kick if I wanted to. Periodically, I will exaggerate the slap of the foot to really feel like I'm out of the water and slapping it, just to make sure that as I'm swimming, I'm not losing that connection between the head, hip, and heels. It's been fantastically helpful because I catch myself losing that connection to the back end every once in a while. And over time, you do it, whatever, every lap, every 100, several times, you're eventually going to get to this point where it's baked in to the muscle memory and your feet are never dive bombing like they have been in the past. And I find it, the numbers don't lie. Like I didn't magically get faster or stronger. I changed this one variable and the pace dropped several seconds. So
Mm.
it's been the easy cause and effect relationship.
It's really interesting to hear, but like the only thing essentially you've changed is that body awareness and making a change to how you hold the body so that you're just reducing drag. Because whenever I've had elite swimmers or really good swimmers who are triathletes on the podcast, they often talk about that body awareness and just recognizing when they're out of position. And so, if that's what the very top athletes are doing, I think for those that aren't at the top, those that are maybe age group triathletes or whatever it is, it's like you probably need to do that times 2 or 3. Like you really need to try and build that body awareness because it can go so easily. And I mean, I've been doing a few analysis sessions with a couple of pro triathletes lately, and you would think at the very top level they generally would have quite good technique and be aware of their head position and all of that. But there's a lot of them who still just have to get the head position right. Like we're looking at it and going, okay, you're lifting your head up too high as you go to breathe, probably just a consequence of swimming open water and siding. But you can see the hips dropping a lot. So it doesn't matter what level you're at. It's just the basics. I think if you can get those right first, have those front of mind, then you can build from there. But body positions should always really be number one.
Yeah. And speaking as an adult onset competitive swimmer, a category of people that need some sort of support group, I think body awareness is terrible in the water, right? And walking
Mm.
around, running, cycling, perfect body awareness. But put yourself in the water and the legs drop, the hips drop. And if you no offense to coaches out there who have been doing this forever, but when you say things like engage the core, those of us that are adult onset swimmers just sort of nod and say, yeah, sure, whatever. I have no idea what you mean, but I don't want to say that I don't because I'll be embarrassed. So there's this to me that other thread that I talked about before of the strength training, the flexibility training, et cetera. That's become an extremely important part. And I think as importantly for the body awareness as for the pure strength and flexibility that it delivers. And to in air rather than water, to be able to control the hips and the heels in air, being able to do that through various exercises. One of which I'm focusing on right now is handstands of all things. But like, if you look at somebody doing a perfect handstand, you would say, if only that dude looked like that in the water, that would be great. It's perfect, shoulders, hips, heels in a vertical line. And when you're really bad at that proprioception and that control of the hips and the heels in air, where gravity is way more your enemy than in water, you get on the wall and you can't even pull your feet away. You don't have the muscle awareness to even pull your heels off the wall gently, like for a quarter of a
In a
second.
handstand
It's
position, you're talking.
in a handstand position, right? And so over the last several months, as I've been doing this more and more, I can feel that core engagement getting so much better. And if I can do it in 100% gravity, then I can certainly do it in the water where, I'm what a 1/10 your weight or something like that. I don't remember the number, but you're a lot less your total weight. And it seemingly should be a lot easier on the muscles to be able to manipulate the heels and the hips to the position
Mm.
that you're after. But it's trying a lot of different things, both in and out of the pool, cues in the pool, using certain new muscles, feeling them as you're using them to bring the heels up. And it's doing it out of the water in various calisthenic type activities to just continue to build that awareness. And I think I have to imagine that a lot of adult onset swimmers who just don't have that experience, have never had to use those muscles in that way, that, they, like me, they didn't realize they had a problem there until it stared them in the face in a video. And they had to try to do something about it. And 15 months of being stuck at 130 finally made me figure it out.
Uh, Talk to me about where you have picked up some of these dryland exercises. So one thing that I find quite funny is we had another athlete, someone who had been to one of our clinics, who had Jay Mueller on the podcast, and he'd made some really good improvements in a pretty short space of time. And he said one of the things that helped him was hanging, just dead hangs off a
Yeah.
bar. So now we're into handstands. We're just getting people to go, yeah, all in all different directions. There's no shortage of directions you can be
Yeah.
hanging. Yeah.
I have been doing dead hangs too. Based on your suggestion, I I found a book so let me back up. I've always had an upper body strength, not problem, but just lack of upper body strength. Prior to swimming 6 years ago, my endurance activity was running and cycling only. No swimming. I ran for 20 years. I never needed upper body. In fact, I wanted less upper body mass to be really good at running. So I have, even before the 15-month frustration, I knew this was a problem and I'd started doing a little bit about it. I was kind of dabbling. Uh, it's called program surfing. You find one guy's program on YouTube and you do that for a while, then you go do somebody else's. It's a horribly inefficient way to do this. And finally, I stumbled on this book called Overcoming Gravity. Um, well known, huge, like multi-inch thick book uh, by a guy named Stephen Lowe, and a bit of a biblical text for calisthenics. And I just built a program, just push exercises, pull exercises, some flexibility, and then a group of handstand related things. And I stumbled on the handstand thing not for swimming. I just thought it would be cool if I could do it. I knew that it would help with shoulder strength for sure. It's a little hard to hang upside or be upside down on your shoulders for for a minute at a time. That's not easy work. So I
Mm.
figured it would be beneficial, but I was just doing it because I was intrigued by it. And he leads his book by saying people that are the best at calisthenics are the ones that are the best at handstand. So it just was a lucky confluence of activities. The general calisthenics instead of say weights, because I can do it at home. I don't have to drive 20 minutes to the gym. And and I'm so weak with my upper body, I don't need weights. So, just body weight was plenty for a while. And to put that in perspective, for the first 59 years of my life, I couldn't do a single pull-up. Never, ever, not one time ever. And and as part of this training, now I'm doing 5 sets of six. So, it's not lighting the world on fire, but that's a big jump in a
Mm.
small amount of time for an old guy. But yeah, it was just sort of lucky, the connection between swimming and I figured that calisthenics and weight training in general couldn't hurt. Muscle mass is a predictor of longevity, and I'm not getting younger, so I might as well make sure I still have some muscle mass before it all wastes away. So I figured it would just be generally healthy, and it turned out to be ideal in with certain groups of exercises, ideal for swimming.
Yeah, and it seems like it's paying off big time, and it makes so much sense that just that control, especially through the core. The phrase that I or the cue that I heard was you've got to swim from the inside out, And
Mhm.
to me, that just means strong core. If you haven't got control over your core and your hips, then everything else is going to be operating without much connection to everything
Right.
else. So I think that strong core makes a huge difference there. And I just want to shift gears a little bit here because you had a race recently where those good swim times were reflected in training in a race. And you've only had sort of one race since then, so you've got another race coming up soon. Just to
Right.
make sure it wasn't a fluke. But talk to me about that race, how it went, how you paced it, because there was a couple of interesting things that you mentioned in our coaching thread that stood
Sure.
out to me that would be useful.
Yeah. So it was a half Ironman in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and it's a river swim. So I wasn't going to be happy or sad at the time because I don't know how strong the current was going to be or what have you. I was judging performance solely versus the rest of the field. And lead from 6 years ago to today, I've been making steady progress as a place within the field. I do a little better in local races, obviously, and do a little more mediocre in some of the either national or big time Ironman events. But it was steady progress down as a percentage of the overall field. And I surprised myself with this where I finished in the top 5% of a field that, based on overall finishing times, was very strong. 124 finishers. I finished seventh out of 124 in the swim. The hindsight 2020 criticism I'll give myself for previous open water problems is not quite panic, but uh, tension, I guess. And so this time around, job number one, chill out a lot. There was going to be no warm up based on the logistics of the start. It was just, you're going to get in and go. And so I had to just clear your mind, think about nothing. Don't think you're not right. It's just a casual swim in a river. Pacing wise, as part of that, I'm gonna I'm gonna start at a pace that's a little bit richer than all day, and I'm gonna gradually turn it up because again, in hindsight, in prior performances, if I start too fast, I don't recover from that. Even if I slow down, even if I break into a backstroke, whatever, I never recover from going out too hard. So I had to definitely dial back the beginning, make sure I wasn't going too hard. If I nail it perfectly, I'll get to that point where it's just a little bit faster than all day pace, and it'll ratchet up to somewhere north of a tempo pace by the time I'm done. And clear the mind, chill out, laugh a couple of times, make jokes with some people, just relax. That all worked great. The next, the next decision was, where do I seed myself? It was seeding by your estimated time in a normal 70.3. So they said, whatever you would normally do in 1900 meters, seed yourself there. You're going to go faster than that per 100, but the current is the current and it'll be different depending on it is. So anyway, my strategy for seeding is put myself in the, the proper seeding. If I think I'm going to do 32, then I'm going to put myself in the 31 to 33 group or whatever it is. Don't overseed yourself and don't significantly underseed yourself. And there's a reason for that became really obvious during the swim. And that is, there's a tendency for other participants to overseed themselves. Some people didn't go to the course talk and hear the instructions, seed yourself by your normal 1900-meter pace. They said, oh, this is a river swim. I'm going to be really fast. So they put themselves in the 25-minute group, right? But other people, they generally think I'm going to have a great day and I'm going to outswim my times, so I better put myself up in the two pods ahead of myself, whatever. And if you do that, people will pass you all day long and it gets really depressing. You don't have maybe with form goggles you do now, but without form goggles, you don't have any indication how fast you're going, except relative to other people. So by seating myself properly, if I'm having a decent day, I should be passing way more people than are passing me because I'm having a good day and I'm probably doing a little bit better than my seating, but everybody else is overseating themselves. And I got in the water and it was a 20-to-1 ratio of people that I passed to pass to me. And it felt fantastic. I felt like I was flying. It's annoying when you get into this, you hit a wall of three people swimming side by side and you have to decide, I'm going to go around them or I'm going to go over them, whatever. That's not fun, but that only happens a few times and you carry on. But to me, that strategy works great because, like I said, mentally looking back on old performances, it's a mental problem. It's not a physical
Yeah.
problem. I can swim way faster than I have in races,
Yeah.
but I get tense. I get pissed at myself. All things go wrong. So to try to maximize things going right, I don't want to be passed a lot because then I'll feel like I'm having a bad day. So that
Mm.
was that was number two. So stay calm, seed yourself properly, pass people all day long. I pushed for negative splits. So just gentle increases in pace every time my watch buzzed. And my watch would buzz I think I had it set for like every 200 yards or something where it would buzz. And you feel most of them, you don't always feel it, but it's sort of a cue for, okay, you can pick it up a little bit as long as you're not feeling really tight in the chest. You're not breathing too hard, whatever. And looking back on the race was actually longer than 1900. It was 2,500 yards and I negative split the whole thing. Every 500 yards was faster than the previous one, except for the very last where there was a traffic jam at the exit. So it was a really well executed race. The, the, the mental strategy during the race was one, the pool cue that I talked about with my feet coming out. So it's harder to feel the wind on your bum when you're lifting your, hips out of the water with a wetsuit on, but your heels are still bare. So every once in a while, I would just lift my heel up. Am I close to the water? Am I close to the water? Obviously, I got some help with the wetsuit, but I like that cue. It works in the pool. I'm used to it. I'm comfortable with it. And it's comforting mentally to know that, yep, I'm not letting go. I'm doing fine. So that was
Mm.
part one of the swim mechanics. Part two was just metronome. Just get into a rhythm, full reach, catch, pull all the way through, and just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. And it worked out great. And
Hmm.
I had another benefit with the sighting. We were swimming under bridges, so you could sight off of the bridge instead of buoys that are barely above the surface. And it was a straight line race down the river. So it was really easy to stay straight, really easy to sight. And I got into that metronome, passing people left and right, feeling really good about the swim, and got out of the water. And oh my God, really? To put it in perspective, the current must have been really strong because I did my fastest 100 yards in the pool is 117, and my average pace was 112. So so there was no doubt a really strong current. But I'm comparing myself against everybody else. Everybody else swam in the same current, and I beat all but six of them. So
Mm.
it was just a phenomenal result. And it uh, for the other two disciplines, at least for me, I I end up doing way worse on the bike and the run if I have a bad swim, no matter the reason. Beat just gets in my head, and
Mm.
it, but if I have a good swim, then I come out, I feel great. I can chill out a little bit at the beginning of the bike and recover the heart rate a little bit, and everything goes better after a good swim. It really sets the tone um, for the rest of the race.
Mm. Oh, there's so many good things you mentioned there. One of them is just in terms of comparing yourself from previous races. Like events are different distances, conditions are different. So I think you're best just to use your general rankings against everyone else as a way to figure out where you're at. But I think the mental thing is a huge one. I work with a lot of different swimmers, and they either go one of two ways. Sometimes they're too tense and they tend to panic a bit in races. But then
Mhm.
sometimes people are just too relaxed and they go too easy where they haven't
Yeah.
even gotten out of zone one really for their swim.
Right.
So,
Right.
and we kind of want to meet in the middle somewhere there. So, and I think certainly that it's almost like you just get this boost of energy every time you pass someone. You're going, yeah, I'm swimming well. Like I feel good. You probably feel like you're going faster than you are just whenever you're overtaking someone. Like that's a really sort of nice boost to have. So I've given the advice in the past, seed yourself up a bit to try and hold times. But in terms of mentally, well, that's a really good way
Yeah.
to go
I
about it.
yeah, I think if I were if I were a lot faster, if I were way out towards the pointy end, I would say, yeah, put yourself up further because that's where you're going to find people that you can actually latch onto and draft off of. But further back, and I mean, I'm not back of the pack if I'm finishing seventh out of 124, seeing my age group. But in terms of the overall race, I'm probably, I don't know, 30% of from the front. There are probably another 4 or 5 groups ahead of me, maybe more, I don't know. But in any event, if I were faster, I would say go up further because you're going to draft. But where I am, you have no idea if the people that you're starting with are draftable. They're probably going to swim slower and you're going to leave them in the dust right away. And so it's just if you're looking for somebody to draft off of, it's a coin toss in that sort of 30 to 35-minute range in a half Ironman. And you're better off, my opinion, at least I'm better off, going with feeling good about my swim. And if I get some drafting benefit as I'm passing people, great. But I'm not looking to latch onto somebody's legs and hang on for 500 yards.
Mm. And the thing is, too, you do get some sort of drafting benefit from about like a tiny bit, about 8 to 10 meters away. But yeah, if you're coming up behind someone, I'd recommend, come up like right behind them, get that draft. And then just as you're about to overtake them, you can just kind of go around the
Mhm.
side of them because you are going to get that, that draft off them. If you think about pushing off in the pool, if you're going 5 seconds behind, you might be about 5, 6 meters away from them. You still get pulled along quite a bit. So, if you're getting that little bit of draft every single time you're going to overtake someone, that adds up as well. So that's almost a way to actually get some draft as opposed to other
Right,
times where you might not get
right,
any if you're
right,
setting yourself
right.
higher. So I think I mean, there's so many good things there, and I love to dig into what's caused a breakthrough for someone. And for you, it sounds like it was the thing that was staring, I guess, both of us in the face was this body position, that undulation, and just then addressing the problem and going about making a change there.
The first thing that you corrected in my stroke 6 years ago was front quadrant. I was horribly not front quadrant. And true to form, I overdid it. No. I got too good at it. And to the point where I have a pause out at the front of the stroke. And, it's not bad. It looks good. It looks like a nice stroke. I think it looks like a really nice stroke, except for the back end and the undulation part. But in terms of the front end, it looks really good. And I had been working on fixing the cues that will fix that. So I think I'll be heading back there. My guess is I'll be heading back to that, if not trying to incorporate it at the same time. I'm keeping my hips and heels at the surface. And the cue that I adopted to get front quadrant was keep your hand out until your your pulling arm is doing its recovery.
Mm,
And there's not to be too late. So what I'm trying to do is switch that to you need to start your catch as you're finishing the exit. So it's sort of counterintuitive if you're thinking front quadrant, like you should exaggerate it so that there's definitely an arm out there. It causes too much of a pause. And so there's this speed up during the pull and then a slow down from not having any stroke going on at all for a fraction of a second. And then you speed up again, you slow down, and it's not super perceptible, but it's there. You can see it. And I think eliminating that pause is going to be really important next.
Mm.
That would be my prediction. But again, we'll look at the video, we'll figure it out and see what the biggest return is for either stroke rate or distance per stroke.
Mm. I think you're right on there. Because the undulation, there is still some undulation,
Mhm.
as you know, like it's not completely eliminated. So I think that'll take a while to really iron out completely. But already those results are great to see. So when you get that even better, there's still another couple seconds there, I think. So that certainly should be number one, just working on better body position. And one thing that I was thinking about recently was we posted that footage of I posted that footage of Dan Smith a couple of years ago, and
Mm.
most people have probably seen that. If you haven't, just look up Dan Smith effortless swimming. He does a really easy 1 minute 10, 100 freestyle. Looks like he's going about 2 minute pace. And I heard him talking the other day because he's doing a little bit of coaching with some junior swimmers, and he was really focused on their body position. So he was talking about the downwards pressure through the chest, drawing the belly button in towards the spine, and just yeah, he talks about that like downhill swimming. And I've always kind of avoided that term because whenever I've seen someone thinking about it, they tend to bury their chest and head too deep. But everything's got its right place and time, and that pressing down with the chest to help raise the hips can be a really useful tool for a lot of people. And
Yeah, I've I've been thinking about that as well. What is the cue there that works for me? I think everybody mentally processes those cues differently. And for some people, they
mm,
swimming downhill, that sounds dumb. I'm not going to do that. For me, I've been thinking of it in terms of finding the right balance point in my body. So it, I think the the goal of saying swimming downhill is really to affect the balance point, because I think that, at least for me, there was a tendency to have my head pointed a little too high, which would bring the hips and the heels down. And if and by telling somebody who's doing that swim downhill, they're actually going to swim straight. So it sort of depends on where the person's coming from, and if you're in that adult onset club, then that phrase swim downhill could actually work, not because they really are swimming downhill. They might overcorrect and sink their head in the water, but there's this natural tendency to be swimming just a little bit upright. At least that's been my
mm,
experience, and I've been thinking about just get the balance point further back, so that your hips and heels are coming up a little bit more naturally. And and if you focus on that in the water, you can feel, the legs you're coming up with at no effort at all, just because you're adjusting ever so slightly to change that balance point.
yeah, absolutely. Most adult swimmers that I've worked with who are really new, they hold their chest and hold their head like their face is just in the water. They've got to have
Mhm.
their head like an iceberg, 10%, 20% out, but the rest needs to be in. And for whatever reason, I think it's just comfort and not fear necessarily, but it's uncomfortable for them to be that much submerged in the water with their
Right.
head, or even just having their ears out. I think it's like sometimes it's that too. They don't want to have their ears in the water because maybe they get a bit of water in there and it's uncomfortable. But yeah, that useful cue of just thinking downhill can raise
Yeah.
the hips.
Well,
And
we don't walk sideways. We don't walk backwards. Our silly little eyes are always wanting to be focused on where we're headed, and swimming is
mm,
different in that regard. And it's a hard thing to fight. And I think it's just a matter of finding the right cue that works for you to get you to the right balance.